if you have a child who is already leaning towards the world, probably the worst thing you could do is tell them you're out today.
Yeah.
Now, granted, there's certain things that can't go on in the home naturally. We
Like
know
sin,
that.
like-
You're not gonna be bringing no girls over my house and up in your room. No, we don't roll like that. And so I remember praying and God told me, he said, don't do that. And I remember speaking to my mom. And she said, I wasn't gonna say anything to you, but I'm glad you decided not to kick him out, because if you do that, you're going to push him into the arms of people that are counterproductive. And all they're going to do is reinforce all of that bad behavior. At least, and I have to be honest with you, at least I see him every day.
Yeah.
At least I talk to him every day. At least when he's going through things, he can still talk to me. And we still have that connection.
What is up, guys? We want to welcome you out to Genlit Podcast. Today we're hanging out with Amanda, and we have a special guest, Pastor Stacey Dillard. So we're going to be talking about a bunch of different topics. Tune in. Let's not forget to subscribe, leave a comment down below. And here we go. Let's get the ball rolling. So, Pastor Dillard, let's get an introduction from you real quick. Testimony, however.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Stacey Dillard. I pastor in Chula Vista, California, where I pastored for the last 13 years. But just to give you a little bit of my testimony, I was raised in church as a young boy. Ever since I was little, being Southern Baptist, we had to go to church, had no real options about going to church. Go to church or get beat. That's the way it works. But when I was younger, we moved away from Georgia, and my mom quit going to church. But she sent my brother and I to church, which I really disliked a lot. I hated the whole idea of going to church. I felt like it interfered with my weekend, with me hanging out with all my friends and then putting me on the goofy Sunday school bus. And so I remember I asked my mom a long time ago, I said, Mom, why do I have to keep going to church? And she said, well, because I'm the boss and I tell you what to do. And I asked her, I said, so when am I going to be the boss? When am I going to be able to decide whether or not I want to go to church or not? And she told me, she said, I'll tell you when you're the boss. And so a little bit of time passes, and I don't know if I was maybe 12 or 13 years old, but I finally stopped going to church. And my life before that was not like really good anyway. I was a very rebellious kid, a very violent kid. I had a lot of pent up emotions that I didn't know how to constructively deal with. And, but I got myself involved in a lot of things, got myself involved in a lot of sexual things and robbing and stealing and all kinds of drama like that. My mom used to be in the military. She married a guy who was in the military as well. And we traveled all over. And I ended up living in Germany for 3 years, and I partied for 3 years the whole time I was in Germany. Moved back from Germany, moved to New Mexico, partied in New Mexico, went to college and played a little bit of basketball as well. But because of my disposition, my attitude, and my inability to actually assimilate with people, I got kicked out of college. So then I have nowhere to go. I have no job. I have no money. But long story short, what ended up happening, I went on this party and binge for like 2 months. I partied every single night. And I had this friend that I met in New Mexico, and he said, hey, my dad's retiring from the military. I'm moving to Chandler, Arizona. I had never been to Arizona, so I didn't even know what Chandler, Arizona was. But he said, I'm moving there. You should come out there and visit me sometime. And so I ended up drifting over. I went on a weekend. I was only supposed to stay for 2 days. So I went to Chandler, Arizona. It was beautiful, man. November 1988. It was gorgeous, man, outside. And I said, I'm never going to leave here. So while I'm there in Arizona, I extended my visit. All my stuff was still in New Mexico. I left all that stuff. So I'm at a car wash with my roommate. And a guy is washing his car, and he's spraying off his engine, and his engine gets wet. He can't start his car. So he asked me and my roommate, hey, can you push me out of the stall? We pushed him out of the stall, and then he said, "Hold on, I want to give you something." And he gave us a flyer. And I remember the flyer, it had on the flyer Ernie Shavers. If you guys know who Ernie Shavers, you guys are really young, you don't know who Ernie Shavers is. But he's a former pro boxer. He fought Muhammad Ali and George Foreman. He was speaking at the church in Chandler. And so he invited me out to this, and it was like 2 weeks had passed, and I wasn't intending on going, but I seen the flyer. I think my friend was smoking some weed. I was drinking some brew. I see the flyer as I'm tossing up my beer, and I said, "Hey Tim, you want to go out to check out this this church?" And the church, 101 East Comstock, right across the street from the apartment that we were staying. Fast forward, I go into the church, and I remember I walked in. The guy who invited me out is on the stage. He sees me. He runs off the stage, runs down the aisle, and he grabs me, and he said, "Tonight, Jesus is going to change your life."
Wow.
And so I'm sitting there in church, which I had vowed I'd never, ever do. And it went left. It didn't go the way that I thought it was going to go, because I went there. My intentions were to check out girls. But God's intention, he cornered me. And I remember I'm sitting there, and I'm under such deep conviction, because the guy's talking about heaven or hell. He's talking about eternity, and he's talking about being rich and having money, and money can't answer your problems and all these other things. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm broke. I have no money, and I'm unhappy. If he's rich and he's telling me money don't answer your problems, what am I living for? And that night, I raised my hand. I invited Christ into my life. And I remember my roommate was kind of like the distance between me and Amanda. And I remember I had my head bowed, and I said, "I'm not going to do this because of my roommate. I'm going to do this because I need to." And that night, I repented of my sins. I can't even remember how I got from my chair to the altar.
Wow.
To this day, I don't even remember. But I remember we went back to the apartment that day, and I said, "Tim," I said, "don't you feel different?" And
Did Tim raise his hand? Did he?
Yeah,
go?
he did.
Okay.
He did. Yeah, my roommate got saved too. And we both started serving God there in the Chandler church, and that was November 1988. And God has been so good to me. Actually, I met my wife the first day I went there.
Really?
No, we didn't.
Whoa.
Yeah, I met her. She was one of the first people that came up to me. I think she saw how good looking I No, no, she came up. She's that kind of person. She comes up, "Hey, good to have you. Thank you for coming out." And I remember meeting her the first day that I was there, and it's kind of crazy. Now we've been married 33 years.
That's
Dang.
awesome.
And so God is good. So that's my
That's cool.
testimony. Amen.
That's cool. Well, we want to relate this to like church kids and backsliding church kids and pastors' kids. So this is a little bit different, but you had already been going to church when you were a lot younger, and you had already made up your mind that I'm never stepping foot into church again. And I think a lot of church kids and pastors' kids can have that mindset, like, "Oh, when I turn 18, I'm never stepping foot inside a church again." But you had made that decision, you had that mindset. We see firsthand that that's not what happened, and that God had a different plan. So
Yeah.
that is pretty cool. That is an awesome testimony. So we want to get into kind of like backsliding and deciding to leave the church. And I know your testimonies that you have 2 kids, one who is backslidden and one who's not backslidden. So if you can go into detail about that, maybe talk about your relationship with them, and maybe pastoring and parenting your kids and that balance between that.
Wow. So I think let me just give a good example, because there's so much that I could talk about.
Yeah.
But I think when we moved to Chula Vista, that was 13 years ago. My kids were kind of young. I think my son was 15. I think my son was 15 and my daughter was maybe 14 or something like that. We were kind of thrust into, because I came off 7 years of evangelizing. So I was gone a lot already.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I was gone a lot. So we ended up going to Chula Vista to pastor the church. So the church had a lot of turmoil in the church. And so I remember this distinctly. The worship leader left. So that meant the drummer of the church took over the worship leading. That meant my son, Devin, had to play the drums. Now, granted, we had given him lessons in drums like 7 years, so he was actually pretty good. But I don't know if he was ready for that. And so I said, Devin, you're on. He says, on what? And I said, you're going to be the drummer now. And I said, that's what we got your lessons for. You need to play. So he moved to play the drums. My daughter ended up singing in the worship team. This is years ago. So we were going on and on and on for years. But if I can just be totally honest with you and transparent, because there's things that I think that we missed along the way. At least me. I don't know about Daphne. You guys can interview her and ask her. But I remember one day, my son, and Devin will probably end up watching this. He came to me and he said, Dad, am I going to have to play the drums forever?
And how old is he?
Man, I can't even remember. Maybe 20 something.
Oh, wow.
But he had played for years. He had played for maybe 8-9 years straight. Every service. That's a long time.
Yeah.
And so, but I'd never picked up on that because I'm pastor, right? I'm pastor. This is what I do. This is what I do. I preach Sunday morning. I preach Sunday night. I preach midweek. That is what I do. But I'd never noticed how it was affecting my kids. I'm just like, no, I'm going to do it. You need to do it. I think that was something that I missed when he told me, Dad, am I going to have to do this forever? And I don't think I ever even answered him. I don't know. But I think that was the beginning of kind of like maybe a little bit of resentment from him towards me, maybe, and maybe towards the church. Because I'm sure he's thinking, come on, we got all these people in church. Are you just going to watch me do this forever? And so I began to see a little bit of resentment from both of my kids. But I think another thing that happened as well, is it okay if we talk about this?
Yes, of course.
I noticed that my kids didn't have a whole lot of good relationships with people in church because they were my kids. And so what happened is initially when we first got there, people reached out to them and they were, hey, we're going to take Devin and Mikkel. But as time began to move along, they were just by themselves. So what ended up happening when they got a little bit older, I noticed that, especially with my son, he got friends somewhere else. So I remember he worked at Costco. He made friends at Costco. He worked at Dick's. He made friends at Dick's. And those began to be his friends. And so he may have been in ministry at church, but the people at church weren't necessarily his confidants or his friends.
Yeah.
They were just people that you do ministry with. And then when he left church, he was with other people. He started kicking with other people. And I watched, there's not much you can do about it. I mean, outside of telling them, you be very careful. But I started noticing that because of the lack of relationships, and so mind you, I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying this is what I saw.
This is the circumstance.
Yeah. And so before long, he began to kind of separate from church life, people in church he would talk to, but he was not close to. It would not be somebody he would go to and say, hey, you know something, I'm struggling with XYZ, will you pray for me? Never. And so I remember one morning, I was out getting a coffee and Daphne calls me and she says, hey, Devin's not coming back to church. And I said, he's not coming today? She said, no, he said he's not going to do it anymore. And so I go home, I walk into his room and I said, Devin.
Devin still lived with you guys?
Yeah.
And he was in his 20s?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so he's in his room and I said, Devin, hey man, what's up? He said, I'm good, Dad. And I said, so you're not coming to church today? And he says, no, I'm not coming back. Whoa. And I said, son, Come on, man. I said, you're the drummer. Now mind you, I still hadn't really processed the whole thing from way back a long time ago. All I was caring about was the drums. Yeah, I was caring about the worship team. I was caring about the drums. You guys catch what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so that morning of church, literally, it was probably one of the worst mornings I've ever had in my life. Me looking at my wife, me looking at my daughter, they're crying, I'm gutted. And so over a little period of time, people notice that he's not coming back. You go from Sunday morning, right? Sunday night, midweek, Sunday morning, Sunday night. So they're like, hey, where's Devin? And I said, why don't you call him? I said, he's been coming to this church all this time. You got his number, don't you? And some people said, yeah. And I said, and so they even asked my daughter, they said, hey, how's Devin? And so she said, why don't you call him? But she said, if you don't have a relationship with him, you probably don't want to call him.
Yeah.
You guys catch what I'm saying? And so it was very, very tough for us, very, very tough for my wife, very tough for my daughter, very tough for our family. So he's been gone for now, this year will be 5 years that he hasn't, been, in the church.
Is he still living there?
Yeah, he still lives with us. I had some people tell me, kick him out like day one. He needs to go. And I'm like, oh, I don't know about that. I said, I don't know. And mind you, whoever's watching online, you do whatever you want to do, man. That's your business. That doesn't matter to me. I know that if you have a child who is already leaning towards the world, probably the worst thing you could do is tell them you're out today.
Yeah.
Now, granted, there's certain things that can't go on in the home naturally. We
like
know
sin,
that. You're not gonna be bringing no girls over my house and up in your room. No, we don't roll like that. And so I remember praying, and God told me, he said, don't do that. And I remember speaking to my mom, and she said, I wasn't going to say anything to you, but I'm glad you decided not to kick him out, because if you do that, you're going to push him into the arms of people that are counterproductive. And all they're going to do is reinforce all of that bad behavior. At least, and I have to be honest with you, at least I see him every day.
Yeah.
At least I talk to him every day. At least when he's going through things, he can still talk to me, and we still have that connection. And so, I don't know. Did I answer any of the questions? I don't know if I answered any.
I don't know. It's getting good. Well, I had asked relationship, pastor and parent relationship with kids. So you're on track.
Pastor-parent relationship.
I like what you said there, though, that he didn't have any relationships in the church because he was the pastor's kid. We brought that up, that a lot of times people say pastors' kids they reference them being alone to being like stuck up, or they think they're better than everybody else in the church. But a lot of times that's not the case. And if you ask a pastor's kid, it's that, well, I can't open up to church people about issues because my family's the example, and I can't open up to my parents about issues because they're also the pastors. And so you kind of get secluded, even if you don't want to be. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. They brush it off as, oh, they're the pastor's kid, they think they're better. And it's like, no, it's hard to connect.
And they even think that because you are the pastor's kid, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And, oh yeah, they'll be fine. Look at pastor, he's strong, he's resilient.
Yeah.
And I find with a lot of pastors' kids, they begin to have an enormous amount of resentment towards people in the church, because you can only imagine, a lot of the pastors' kids, they have served in like this glass bowl for years. Even if they're not functioning in any kind of ministry, people are still watching them, and they gauge how the pastor is by what his kids do. So they always have to be on. They always have to be smiley face. They always have to be doing all of these things. And I think when they feel that they have no one to go to, and like I said before, and then when they have other options, they exercise those options.
Yeah, like Costco and Dick's Sporting
Goods. Yeah, you got options, man. You got people you can go work out with. If nobody wants to in church want to go work out with you, you got somebody at work that will go hang out with you. And so I think with as far as like parenting my kids, like I said, I'll be the first one to admit, I think because of ministry and the things I do, I missed a lot of things. I think I missed things when I was evangelizing. I'll give you an example. We were having like an evangelism seminar years ago. And this is the first time I ever heard my daughter ever testify. And this is probably 10 years ago, something like that. And I'm sitting in the back of the church. I'm kind of just chilling. And they're inviting people up and giving testimony. So my daughter gets up and she says, I want to ask God to forgive me and forgive me for being mad at my dad. I'm like, whoa. Who?
You're like, cut the mic.
And so everybody turns around, they're looking at me. And I'm looking at her like, is this for real? Is she joking? And she says, yeah, I need to forgive my dad because I was very upset with him because he was gone all the time. So I was gone probably 10 years. I mean, I traveled a lot, and she was very upset with me. And so later on, when I talked to her, I said, hey, were you totally serious about that? And she said, yeah. She said, you couldn't tell that I was be upset with you? And I said, no, actually, I didn't. So I say that because I can see now I missed a lot. I missed a lot of opportunities to minister. I think in a lot of ways, I made a lot of assumptions that were very unhealthy as far as my kids and as far as how I treated them and the standard that I held them to versus other people. You know, I think when you, with your kids, as parents, we can, especially pastors, we can be specialists at having wisdom and discernment, right? With other people. We're like, yeah, I got around them. The Spirit of God spoke to me and blah, blah, blah. But then when it's our kids, we don't hear anything, at least me. And so I miss things with my son. I miss things with my daughter. But thanks be to God that he's allowed me to step back and listen more, because I think as a parent and being in ministry and being a pastor, we are so inundated with people talking to us that when our kids get around to talking to us, they're talking, but we're not even listening. It's almost like, wow. You're like, oh my gosh, are they ever gonna shut up? You get what I'm saying? Yeah. And they're just talking and you're not even hearing really what they're saying. And so now that I'm a bit older and they're a bit older, I'm trying to meet them like grown people. And I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt and understand where they're coming from. Because I've never been in the position that they are. I never was a pastor's kid. I never knew what it was like to have to go somewhere when other people don't have to go there.
Yeah.
That I have to be there, and the parents say, no, you're just going to be there because I told you you're going to be there, and straighten your face up. You get what I'm saying? And so I try to meet them where they're at, and I have to be honest with you. One of the best things that happened to us is COVID.
Because you guys were together?
Oh, man, it was great. It was weird at first. But I remember I'm sitting at my desk, and we have a big family room, and my son Devin, he would always just take his food and never sit with us. So then COVID kicks in. He has nowhere to go. So I see him, he brings his food and he sits down. I'm like, hey, bro. He's like, yeah, Dad, I'm going to eat with you. I said, no, that's cool, man. Sit down and eat with me. And so we got super, super close. And so God is bringing a real healing and a real restoration to our family and to wounds and even trauma that people have had, that my kids have had, and that I've had in ministry through this wonderful season that we are right now in our lives.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Going back to what you said about your daughter and the being bitter at you for being gone so much. We experienced something like that because my dad also evangelized.
Yeah.
And he was never, ever home. But one night I was in my mom's room with her, and there's a picture of me, my mom, and my dad. And I don't think a lot of people know this, but I'm staring at the picture of my dad, and I'm just sitting there and I'm looking at it. And my mom comes to me and she's like, what are you doing? I think I was 8 years old. And she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I know this is my dad, but I don't recognize him. Wow. Like, I know this is my dad in the picture, but like, I don't recognize him.
Wow.
And she instantly called my dad. He had been evangelizing maybe 4 years in that time. And she instantly called my dad and was like, tell him what you just told me. And I was like, Dad, like, I know this is you. I know you're my dad, but I don't recognize you. Like, I feel like I don't know you.
Wow.
And he said that his heart just broke, you know, like here he is saving like a bunch of other people's kids. And I know it's a lot of times the case with that I've seen my parents go through with their backslidden children is, God, here I am helping all these other people's children get saved, but what about mine?
Yeah.
And it was just a surreal moment. And he ended up going into Pastor Ruby's office and being like, look, like I need to take a step back because my daughter doesn't even recognize me. And after that, we got sent to Bolivia.
Yeah, you miss so much. I tell people all the time, evangelizing is not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
No, it seems glamorous, but it's not very glamorous. And gone for 20 days out of a month. You know what I mean? It's a lot of time. And so I think if parents are watching, especially, fathers who are watching, you have to, when you're evangelizing, especially, and you're gone all the time, you have to be able to connect with your family when you come home. You have to be extremely intentional because you only have a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
And I would take my daughter with me a lot on trips. And she would go with me to England, go with me to a lot of different revivals. And she was just little. I remember my wife would do her hair, and I'm like, don't mess your hair up because I can't fix it. But me and her, we really were able to bond and connect. We go to a lot of long trips together. But there was just a major disconnect. And so to any parents that might watch or anything like that, or any kids that are watching who are evangelist kids, be gracious, and as well, don't harbor bitterness in your heart. The best thing you could do for your family and for your parent is to sit them down and say to them, hey, you know something? I really need you. And when you're here, could you really be here? Don't be here physically, but your mind is all over the place. I need you to really be here, and I need to be able to talk to you. And I think that would be a wonderful blessing to your family if you're watching.
So if you were to give any pastor's kids or church kids that are currently maybe contemplating backsliding or are already backsliding and listening to this, if you were to give them any bit of advice, what would that be?
Okay. Wow, there's a lot of things that I could talk about and tell them to do or what not to do. One of the things I would say is there needs to be a real conversation with either their parents or with leadership before their heart becomes hardened. Because I think sometimes when kids are contemplating things or they're contemplating leaving, they actually think that once they leave, what has settled in their heart is going to subside. When in all actuality, it really doesn't, because there's an unresolved issue. So one of the things I would say to kids that are maybe watching right now, and you're like, you know something, I can't wait to get out of here. I'm tired of all of this and I'm tired of all of that. What you should do is have an honest conversation with either your parents or have an honest conversation with leadership, and just lay all the cards on the table. If you are feeling like you are just burning the candle at both ends, and you are unproductive in whatever ministry or whatever you may be functioning in, you need to have that conversation. Just say, I'm not being fair to the church. I'm not being fair to myself. I'm not being fair to my parents. But I think so often kids in their minds, and it's legitimate to a certain degree, they think, if I get out of ministry, I'm going to let my parents down, or I'm going to let the church down, or I'm going to let pastor down. And so I'm going to keep grinding this thing out no matter what until resentment sets in. Yeah, so definitely have a conversation and definitely talk, especially if you can feel the tinge of that resentment coming, that the tinge of bitterness beginning to settle in your heart. You need to make a shift, and you need to do that immediately. And don't think that the shift is you leaving church. That's pretty drastic. That'd be like, me cutting off my hand because I got a paper cut.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit drastic. Well, I'm just going to leave the church. But sometimes I think in people's minds, they feel that that is the only way that I can get out of this. I have to leave the church, but I don't think that's the right answer. I think the right answer is to have a conversation. And you do have options. You can, I'm not telling people to, just quit ministry, but you may need to step back and work on your personal growth and enlarging as a believer, that you can be better down the road. Amen.
Yeah,
that's good.
Especially if the salvation was already very small, or if there was no salvation, whatever, and you're in ministry, to step back would be ideal.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll be honest. A lot of church kids are trying to function in a level of spirituality when they've never ever been spiritual ever.
Yeah.
And sometimes they step into it because they think that's the natural course of their life. I need to become this spiritual person, but when really they just need to lay a hold of God, find out who they are in Christ. Sometimes we put the horse before the carriage, and so we have ministry and then spirituality, when really it should be spirituality and let the natural flow be ministry, and the expression of ministry after you have a spiritual encounter with God. And I think maybe, now we're talking about, maybe that can be where the resentment is. You're trying to do something on a spiritual level that if someone asks you to articulate it, you actually couldn't even articulate it because you don't know what it looks like. And so you only can go a certain degree and a certain level that way out of your own flesh before you just implode or explode or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So I hope that answers the
That's
question.
really good, actually.
That's good. I was thinking maybe you could shed light to maybe telling the backslidden church kid how it makes the parents feel, or what that perspective is on your end.
Okay, that's a really good question and topic. I know for me personally, it is very, very painful to not have my entire family at church. Very, very painful to watch my my daughter just really go through it. And even more than that, I think my wife, because she ever since my kids have been born, I mean, we dedicated them to the Lord. We dedicated them. We stood on the stage and we said, God, they belong to you. And then to not have them, especially with my son, Devin, to not have him even really want that part in his life anymore. It was really, really difficult, and even more difficult for my wife, because as parents, you feel like a failure. You feel like, hey, man, here I am. I'm a pastor. People all over the world respect me to a certain degree, and I can't even keep my family in church. I can't even keep my loved ones in church. They don't even want to come anymore. They don't want to even sit under my ministry. I guess the irony is sometimes you'll meet people, you'll go preach at a church, and they're like, man, if I'm ever in California, man, I'm coming to your church, man. I'd love for you to be my pastor. And then you have a child who's like, I don't want you. I don't want you to be my pastor. And it's a really hard pill to swallow. But I will say, yes, it is painful, but it can't be to the degree of pain to where it's about me and how I feel and the optics of what people are going to look at and view me. It can't be that way. Where, well, something, man, I'm Pastor Stacey, and my son, I can't believe. That's all self-serving. But at the end of the day, I continue to love my son. I let him know, son, I really felt that when you did not just come talk to me. I said, we're grown men. You're a grown man. I'm a grown man. All you had to do is just sit down with me and say, Dad, I even told him, I said, Devin, if you don't want to play the drums anymore, don't play them anymore. It's fine. If you don't want to do children's church anymore, don't do it anymore. I just want you to serve God. But by the time we even could get to that conversation, it was over. And it really, really hurt us. But because God is in the healing and the restoration business, he is wonderfully healing. And I think there's a lot of things that I have learned, and there's a lot of things that my wife has learned, and there's a lot of things I know that my children have learned. And so you have my daughter who's still in church. I love her, but I can't just assume because she's there, she's fine. So I still have to pastor her. And I have my son who's maybe not coming to the church right now, but I have to treat him just like I would somebody else who I was trying to get to come and serve God. I need to be compassionate. I need to be loving. I need to be caring. I need to be forgiving. And I need to have vision and hope for his life, even though he's my son. And I think our better days and our blessed days are ahead of us.
Yeah, that's good.